All right, Kevin. Hey, man, thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always love it.
Now, you had said that you wanted to talk about Logan Basic,
Yep.
um, which is obviously very important. And so I thought I would ask you at least one Logan Basic question before we get too far into this. And that is, have you ever used Logan Basic in your practice?
No, I have not. I'm
Never?
I'm scared. I'm just scared. I have not. I used
Uh,
it when I was a student at Logan in student clinic, but not in my own private practice or any other person's practice
did you
or anybody else's privates.
did you do skin on skin when you were a student doing Logan Basic in student clinic?
Absolutely. Had to. Dr. Montgomery.
I actually have I had sent my mom over to see Dr. Montgomery because I'm still outside the St. Louis area. And she had a, I guess you would call it a dislocated coccyx. She fell on her tailbone.
Yeah.
And I remember them talking about that at Logan, about that coccyx adjustment and whatever. And I was not about to do that on anyone, especially not my mother. And so I was like, go see Dr. Montgomery. He's the perfect person for that. And he really helped her out, but it was definitely out of my comfort zone for sure.
Absolutely.
So that'll be the Logan Basic question. All right. So let me ask you this. Like, you work a lot with chiropractors that are getting started and chiropractors that are setting up their practice and kind of going through that whole thing, similarly to that to what I do.
Yeah.
Um if you could like wish or kind of will a particular skill or habit onto new docs, so just something across the board that you could just be like, you know what, this would be a great thing for everybody to have. And obviously there's different ways to be successful and there's different skill sets and all these type of things that equal success. But
Yeah.
if there's like one thing you can kind of look at everybody and just be like, man, this seems to be a universal thing that's lacking. And if I could, if I was in control of the universe and I could kind of bless the new chiropractors in this world, this is the skill or this is the habit that I would give them. Like, what would that thing be?
It would be communication, but I'm going to go a step deeper into that in a couple of different steps deeper. It would be self-awareness for sure,
Hmm.
and being self-aware of where you are lacking communication. And then also a kind of a, cliche at this point is a growth mindset of that you can get better at it. And I think I'm a pretty good example of it because I'm still not great at it. And I've got my blind spots and my flaws on communication. But if you if you took me now, almost 44 versus even 34, it's a stark difference. And I'm not talking about just public speaking or because I have a podcast and that type of stuff, but just in general, communicating to my community in different formats, communicating to my patients well, and communicating to my team well. I've improved in those. And again, I'm not world class at it. I'm not going to be, Ronald Reagan is, I could just, but it's, can you be even better than you were? And that's what I want people to realize is that you can in a lot of different arenas. But communication just is so important, and it has clinical outcome aspects to it as well. And I think that's something that a lot of chiropractors are struggling with. And I always I try not to play the generational game, right? And you and I were talking before we recorded about being an '80s baby, and
Yeah.
we're right at Gen X. And they actually have us carved out. I think it's like 1977 to 83 is they call it Zillennials, like with the X. And it's because
Not a fan.
we grew up without all the stuff. We didn't have the computers and I mean, we had three channels. We
Yeah.
kind of lived that first part of the 1980s and early 90s, kind of like our parents did. And then
I always say we're the last generation of free range kids.
Yeah, and we had all of that, and you had to learn how to socialize with your friends, and you weren't just sitting there on your phone, and you didn't have a computer. I didn't get my first computer till college. I didn't get my first cell phone till college, right? So I developed all the social things and the communication, and then I layered on technology, and I understand it pretty well. I'm not going to be like the Gen Zs are right now, but ultimately, the communication it's got to be done for this. You mentioned the younger crowd, and they're starting to come into chiropractic. I believe they're kind of the Gen Z crowd, or the very tail end of millennials, and I just want them to realize that the communication is going to be very important amongst other traits to really get this practice going.
That's actually really interesting because I don't know that I don't know that I've really actually thought about that until you just were talking about how technology, and I guess I can think about it within the context of my kids, but
Mhm.
I never really thought about that group that is used to texting and used to messaging and used to like the electronic communication where they're really good at those things,
Yeah.
that may have actually stifled their ability to deal with human beings. And as a chiropractor, you can't get around dealing with human beings. Like your business is never going to be digital. It's never going to be like during COVID, it was like this, like, oh, we should do virtual whatever. And it's like, how are you like, there's no way you could be a virtual chiropractor in
Mhm.
any sort of traditional chiropractic sense. And I don't think I've ever really thought about just the stuff that you and I would take for granted, the difficulty of, asking a person out in person. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
The difficulty of whatever that happens to be that we went through kind of naturally as kids, where younger people now that are in their 20s and maybe even in their early 30s are sort of have been deprived of that experience naturally. So I don't think I've ever actually even thought about that.
Yeah, and then you got to think about it because it's hard anyway. So I'll go back in time when I was 26, 27, and I'm practicing. Inherently, you're not going to have the ability to have a lot of different topics of conversation. Like at 44 now, I can talk about history. I can talk about politics. I don't try to do that in my patients, but if they bring it up and we're kind of
Yeah.
congruent, I'll chat about it a little bit. Or, I could talk about popular culture. I could talk about a lot of different things because I've got more wisdom at this point. And when I was 26, I didn't necessarily have that, but I still knew how to communicate. I knew how to build rapport. And I think we could talk about report of findings. We could talk about giving a treatment plan. Those are all essential, and communication is key to that. But there's also just the rapport building. Like, how does that patient feel when you're just having a 10 or 15-minute conversation? Are you building that rapport? Are you able to talk about different topics? Are you able to break the ice? Are you able to relate to that person? Are you able to listen? Right? A lot of factors that um, it's hard for everybody in every generation. There's some people that are born with it, but you can get better. But I think, the younger crowd coming out, they're going to have to double down on getting better at that, from what I perceive.
I remember it's probably a year or two ago, I was talking to one of my buddies from chiropractic college, and he was um, kind of explaining uh, like people, what I would consider people management regarding, practice. And he was sort of talking about like a younger chiropractor that he was working with and trying to help. And he was sort of explaining like it's so simple, and it's so like, and he's kind of, and I told him, I said, I think you're taking for granted the years of experience you have of dealing with people. Like if he were to put himself, cause like I knew him back then, like, it's like I knew him when he graduated, and the skills he has now of dealing with people, managing people, being comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, being
Mhm.
willing to talk to patients about things that they might seem like a big deal, but things that when you have that experience, you're used to having those conversations and realizing managing it in a way that it's okay. Uh, it just was something that I told him. I was like, I think you're probably taking for granted that you are much better at that than what you used to be. And when he really sat and thought about it, he was like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think
Mhm.
you're right that I'm holding this young doc to a communication standard
Yeah.
that he has developed over almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I would say he is someone that naturally is a quick learner. He is
Mhm.
someone who is naturally kind of committed. He's good with humans. He's naturally good with humans. So you take someone who is naturally good with humans, and then you give them 17, 18, 19 years of actual clinical experience. He's exceptional at the thing that we're talking about. And I told him, I was like, I think you're probably being a little hard on
Mhm.
this young person who has no experience. But I hadn't actually considered the fact that they're probably starting further back than even you and I did because of that we're living in a world of texting and technology.
Yeah, there's the potential of that for sure. And I think, to layer on a little bit to it is I think you need to it brings up the point of delayed gratification and having stamina for the profession. And you're going to have to realize that from what I experienced myself and what I've seen with chiropractors that I've worked with is I feel like, and this is just general range, but age 35 to 55 is kind of the sweet spot. And that is the sweet spot in a lot of professions. You have a again, generally a good 20-year window where you're just firing on all cylinders. You're still young, healthy, and energetic, but now you've got wisdom, more clinical experience. You're communicating better. It really all comes together, and that's when you tend to make your most money and your practice to be the best at that point. But a lot of people really have a hard time getting from, say, let's just call it age 25 to that mid 30s to where it's really firing on all cylinders. And again, 35 is just a random number. I think for me, it was 33. For some, it might be even earlier. But that's when I really was like, oh, I'm making good money and I got a good
Yeah.
practice that I built. And like, this is great. I can see myself doing this. And I'm really glad I became a chiropractor, like all those things. But I graduated at 26. And so it was like 7 years of not bad. It just was like I was building a book of business and I was
Yeah.
building a skill set and I was, you know, just getting better at my craft. And then ultimately it's over the last 10 years, so from age 33 to now, a lot of fruit has been bared there. So it's been nice.
Do you think people can get one of my concerns is you came up the same time as me, and it's like if back in like 2004, 2005, 2006, whatever, you wanted to get some really good practice advice,
Yeah.
you're basically stuck um signing up for some sort of practice management, where you get the book, you get the manual, you kind of get there like, this is how we run a practice, say these words, do this thing exactly, this sort of cookie cutter thing.
Yeah.
And I would say good advice, cutting edge device, diversified advice was hard to come by. It's just you could find particular advice from a particular person, but it wasn't really going to be tailored or unique. It just I don't think it was easy. And now my concern, or one of my kind of concerns that's always in the back of my head, is you have things like my podcast and your podcast, and then you have a paid program and I have a paid program, and there's all of this stuff that is affordable, it's
Yeah.
abundant. There's better free stuff available now than anything that was paid available when I first got started. And I think one of my concerns can be that I think young chiropractors can find themselves listening to so many different voices and so many different things that they have a really difficult time getting narrowed down to a particular path that they want to take because they're trying to take all the paths, or they're trying to be great at everything.
Yeah.
Is that ever something that you think about at all, or you have any thoughts about that?
I do. And if you give me a few minutes, I'm going to kind of give a couple parallels here. I see it clinically as well, right? So
Yeah.
I had talked about on a podcast episode, there's like three phases of sports chiropractor. I consider myself a sports chiropractor. And I was kind of in that phase two where I came out and I was like, I had a great uh, tool set. I had my palpation manipulation. I had one of the levels of ART. I knew grass and I knew some rehab, and that was what I had, and that was a lot for then in '05, and I got to really focus on a few things. And now what I see with a lot of the younger DCs, or even some of the ones that have been in practice for a bit, I mean, they've got 16 different types of rehabs and they've got 14 different types of soft tissues, and it just becomes this paralysis of analysis from a clinical standpoint,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I see it, the water gets muddy there for them clinically. So that happens. Then you layer on like what you're talking about, it kind of as far as like marketing and business and communication and financial advice and like all the different resources there. Then their head's spinning over there and they can't get it figured out, right? And there's just a lot of stuff and they're kind of in the morose of it all. And so I think what you got to do is really find someone that resonates with them, whether it is clinically or whatever. And you need to really have like the way I consider myself, what I do for the profession is I collect and catalog resources that I can then distill down for a chiropractor that's going to fit them. It's not just my system. It's just like, okay, this is where this is where your location is. This is the type of practice you want, blah, 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 blah. This is where you need to focus your energy on and get good at that and then move on to the next thing. Everybody wants to be like fully certified in everything and fully knowledgeable in everything at
Yeah.
27, and it just doesn't happen. And that's where that delayed gratification is going to come into play again, is where it's like, take this step by step and master the craft and implement it and grow from there, and then think about the next thing. And I think we're seeing people get just overloaded with information for sure.
How does someone know? Because I'm with you. Like I think that simplification is super important. Like where it's like you have to have, even if you listen to a bunch of different voices, you need to have a primary voice that you're sort of basing like this is the direction that I'm going to go, and these other things become complementary. Like you can't, all the volume cannot be exactly the same. It's like it's okay to have a lot of different voices and a lot of different books and a lot of different things, but they can't all be the same volume. You have to have something that is primary and other things have to become secondary and tertiary. um I think this is a difficult thing for people in general, but especially young docs. But it's like, how do you help someone know w- when to hold and
Mhm.
when to move on, like when to tweak it. I did a podcast just this week where one of the things I always say is do you keep it, do you scrap it, or do you keep it, do you tweak it, do you scrap it? Like those are the three questions
Mhm.
that I'm always asking at certain times of the year, where I'll look at the things I'm doing and I'm saying, is it fine, do I keep it,
Mhm.
is there potential there, but it just needs to be tweaked, or has it run its course, or it's just not working and it's just time to move on? How does someone know how to do that? Whether it's clinically, where it's like they feel like, oh, I've learned this, or I've done this certification, I've kind of gotten the most out of this. Now I can move on to something else,
Mhm.
or I'm beating my head against the wall. It's time for me to do something else. Like
Yeah.
there's so much. Like, there's so many things that people can do, and so many directions they can go. Like how do you help someone sort through that to where they know when it's time to stay and when it's time to kind of move on?
Yeah, I like to do a 3-year vision for people and just kind of reverse engineer where they see themselves in 3 years, and then does it serve that? Then obviously there's going to be some layers to it, but from a clinical standpoint, I want to know, because there's some chiropractors in my world here that are like really what you would consider rehab chiropractors. They put the rehab number one, right? And then everything else is below that. And even manipulation, soft
Yeah.
tissue, right? I'm just going
Yeah.
to take those three things, right? There's other things like laser, there's modalities, right? But let's just take the fundamentals of, as a chiropractor, joint manipulation, soft tissue, and rehab. There's going to be chiropractors that really are going to put that rehab on the top. And I'm not going to try to convince them otherwise. I just want to know that's what they're looking at, right? Whereas I have others, and if you ask them and they said, no, I think the palpation manipulation is the fundamental. I had a patient describe it to me once, which I really liked, was, um, you know, you have to have what your repeatable kind of landmark thing is, what your core product would be, right? And he came to me and he looked at me, and to him, my core product for him was ART, right? And that's why he came to me. Okay. Now I put my core product, the manipulation, like I still put that on the top, but below that is soft tissue, and I happen to be ART certified, and then I have rehab as well. So kind of a three-pronged approach. But for me, it's there. But some patients, it's a little bit different. But a long-winded thing is like, I want to get clear. What's that chiropractor saying? I'm not going to argue with them on like, oh, well, you shouldn't be rehab first or you shouldn't be ART first. you should always be a chiropractor. I'm not going to play that game. But if they come to me and they say, I really want to stand out with palpation manipulation, but I also want to do muscle work and rehab, and I get to know them, and it's like they're really good at rehab, and I get adjusted by them, and it just was not good. Then
Yeah.
we have a core product skill set um, disconnect. Okay, and so what I would really try to get that chiropractor to make sure that they have is that, what do you want to be your core product or your core competency, and then you better be world class at that
Yeah.
first. Then we can go from there. So if you put, ART soft tissue as you want that to be your core competency, and you want that people to know you for that, and plenty of ART providers do, that's fine. Then you better be world class at ART. Then you can add rehab. Then you can go and hone in your manipulation if you're going to offer it. So that, I know that was long winded, but I think that's what you got to get clear on, what you want your core competency to be, and then be world class at that, and then go from there. Now, a lot of them are going to have to be get like, even if you don't want your manipulation to be core competency, but you're going to offer it, you better get damn good at that, because a bad adjustment's really a silent killer of a practice.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of chiropractors that don't know why their practice isn't growing. You get adjusted by them, and I was like, what percentage of your patients get adjusted? Oh, most of them, 90%. It's like, man, 90% are getting a bad adjustment. That's
Yeah.
just killing it. And they're not coming there for your rehab. Maybe they are, but I'm just saying for this particular chiropractor, it's like you said, they're coming there for the adjustment. That's my take on it. And it's not easy. And I wish it was, you could wave the magic wand and everybody would be clinically competent at their core focus. But uh, that's my take on it.
I feel very, 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 very strongly about the fact that human beings don't go from mediocre to great.
Yeah.
I feel like human beings go from good to great,
Hmm.
and it doesn't make any sense to look at something where you have a talent deficiency and insist on being great at it.
Yeah.
It's, if we could just be honest, like, not all of us are great at everything, and
Hmm.
nobody's great at everything. And there are things that I'm naturally gifted at, that I could take those things and I could be exceptional at those things if I really worked at it.
Yeah.
But there are also things that I suck at that, if I worked really, really hard, I could go from sucking to sucking less. But that doesn't move the needle. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't, nobody comes to you because you suck less at the
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And I always tell people, I was telling my son this the other day when he was just talking about, we got talking about like colleges and future and stuff, which he's 14. So it's like none of this actually matters. But I told him, I said, you have to look at what is your God-given talent, what are your interests, and what are your opportunities. And I said, where those three things overlap, there's a sweet spot there where you can really make it. Like, you can really make something happen. But I said, but if you're really interested in something and you have this amazing opportunity, but you don't have any sort of God-given talent, like you suck, like you could be, he started playing the guitar recently.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, if you're interested in that, even if you had the opportunity to be in this amazing band, if you suck, like you're just not good at it, it doesn't matter. And you could be super talented at something and be really interested, but you have no opportunity. And it's like, well, that also doesn't matter. So, that's, but one of the keys to that is sort of like you talked about, where it's like, if you're going to do something, um, I think it's really important that you're known for something within your community. It's better to be known for something than to be kind of okay at everything.
Yep.
And that thing you're known for, you better be freaking good at it, or as good as you possibly can be, because that's the driving force for everything that you do. That's going to give you the opportunity to do everything else.
Yep, absolutely. And just one kind of final touch on that. We do a lot of rehab in our practice, and the other thing I want the younger DCs to get clear on is that I love rehab chiropractors. Like, they do great work, but you got to make sure you have a sustainable business model around that, because that's the other thing I'm seeing a lot is unfortunately, if they're the only provider there and they don't have any help, which a lot of them are, when they start their own practices, they're spending 30-45 minutes with a patient
Yeah.
doing rehab stuff, but then applying that into kind of a typical chiropractic
Yep.
cash or an insurance model, and it's like oil and water, and they're just spinning their wheels, busy, They get busy enough, but busy is like 12 patients in a day.
Yeah.
And there's just never enough meat on the bone to pay themselves what they want, let alone hire a front desk, let alone hire a rehab CA to do
Yeah.
that for them. It becomes this vicious cycle that I see, and it can get hard, get them, it's hard to get out of that sometimes if you don't have some proper guidance.
I know that that's one of the things that I do with my membership stuff. Like I kind of consider myself a foundation layer.
Hmm.
Um, I don't really dictate what a chiropractor builds. It's sort of like there's a ton of different directions that people can go with the stuff that I teach. What the stuff that I teach is these are the things, this is the structure, and this is sort of like this is the stuff you need to think about. And that's one of those things where it's kind of like it doesn't make sense. It's like this is a really basic question, but it's really important because you don't want to be 5 years into your career and then have a light bulb moment of this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I had a friend that did that. He was a trainer at the gym that I go to now, and I've gone there for the last 10 years. And it was probably, I met him and started talking to him, kind of developed a friendship with him. And he was telling me about, because I was helping the gym, and he was telling me about how their fee structure was as personal trainers.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, well, this is a good job for someone who's fresh out of college or
Yeah.
someone who's learning or whatever. But this is not he's older than me. He's got a family he's trying to take care of. Like he has aspirations of making a career out of this.
Hmm.
This is not the place because it doesn't make any sense. Like the money doesn't make sense. Like you can't make a living here,
Yeah.
not for a family. And I kind of I don't want to tell him what to do. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's just somebody I talk to. It's not.
Hmm.
And then it was probably like 3-4 years ago. He had told me he got a job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, did you do the math? And
Yeah.
he says, yeah, I can't, it's never going to work. And I said, yeah, I kind of knew that. Like but
Yeah.
it's amazing sometimes that people don't do the
And
math.
it's a fascinating parallel to chiropractic because yes, so many
Yeah.
personal trainers get into personal training into their 20s and then they exit it into like real estate or something else. Like
Yeah.
they just really like, okay, this isn't working to serve me long term. I know some world class trainers because they were able to really hone their craft, specialize, and they got lucky in certain ways. And they're working with high level people, whether it's being
Yeah.
athletes or executives, and they're charging a lot of money, and they're able to scale that in a sense, and they get other trainers under them, and and they do really well, and they flourish, and we put them on a pedestal, and we try to be them, or these personal trainers do in their 20s, like, oh, I want to be like that person. And I've been fortunate enough to work with a handful of these types of strength coaches or speed coaches. It's pretty impressive what they do. But it's just like for every, one of them, there's 10,000 that,
Yeah.
got out of it at 27 years old because like they realized. Now, to bring it to chiropractic, it's like it's a lot easier to get out of personal training and get into a profession than it is to drop
Yeah.
chiropractic because you went for 8 years and you got
Yeah.
250 in debt and you're a doctor and like how, and so they're, if they're not careful and they don't figure out the business model of it and obviously be considered an expert in their community, they're going to run into that same math problem that you mentioned. It's just a lot harder to get out of it as a chiropractor. And then you're kind of kicking yourself in your ass for the next 30 years.
Yeah. I actually thought of two things. One, as I thought of when you're talking about people that think they're gonna, for every one that's rich doing that, there's like 10,000. The thing that came to mind is podcasting.
Yes, 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 yes.
I mean, you and I both
You and I are the rich ones.
listen. Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to other podcasters that work with chiropractors, and I know that I'm in the same sad state that they are. Um, and I tell people this because I do have people that get a hold of me and they're like, "Oh, you've been podcasting for a long time," and they look at a Joe Rogan or somebody like that, and they're like, "Oh, I want to make money podcasting," and it's like I tell people like I don't make money podcasting. Like I make money because people listen to my podcast and then they sign up for my membership or they listen to my podcast and they have me build a website for them or they have me do SEO for them or whatever. Like I have secondary services. Well, I would consider them primary services. Like I have these services that people I build trust, and then they do those things, and that's how I make money. I don't make any money from podcasting.
Mhm.
And if I was just sitting here like building content, thinking to myself, like, oh, I'm going to build this huge chiropractic podcast that I'm going to have sponsorships and I'm going to be like, whatever, like anyone who thinks they're doing that in chiropractic hasn't done the math,
Yeah.
because there's not enough chiropractors to have that kind of income coming from a chiropractic podcast.
Yeah.
It just, you can make some money, but you're not ever going to, that's never going to be your job.
Yeah. No,
But that's just because, I've done the math. So
yeah.
I'm not
I've got
crazy.
a few less listeners than Rogan.
Yeah. I have a lot less.
But yeah, no, it's yeah, actually Tim Ferriss talks about it a fair amount where he struck when the iron was hot and he hit a grand slam for sure. But it's not going to happen for everybody. It's a very, 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 very small amount.
Well, the same thing is true for, um, it's like someone saying like, I'm gonna make money playing baseball.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can, sure, you could be filthy rich. And I think chiropractic, I've used that analogy before when talking about the chiropractic profession, because I don't think it's fair for young people that are looking for a profession. Like, let's say you have no real, you don't have roots in chiropractic. You're
Mhm.
not necessarily dead set on becoming a chiropractor, but you're just looking at things and saying, no, physical therapy sounds good. Chiropractic sounds good. I could be an eye doctor. I could be a
Yeah.
lawyer, whatever. And you're kind of looking at professions, and then you go and Google how much money do chiropractors make, or that sort of.
Mhm.
That is a very, very unfair and unrealistic view of what it means to be a chiropractor, because you could look at a thing and say, oh, well, if I practice in Maryland, the
Mhm.
average chiropractor makes $97,000 or whatever, like some number. And it's like, yeah, but if you go to Maryland and talk to chiropractors, some of those chiropractors are making 250, some of
Yeah.
those chiropractors are making 15.
Yeah.
It's like, the span is just like saying I get paid to play baseball. It's like, yeah, there's some guys that are riding the bus and they're getting, $500 a week to play baseball. And then there's other guys that are making $20 million a year. You know, it, it's not fair really to look at chiropractic from the outside and decide kind of arbitrarily on whether you want to do the profession or not, because there's so much to being successful as a chiropractor
Yeah.
that goes way beyond what you would know from the outside and way beyond what you would know from school. And I'm not even saying it's the school's job to teach you how to run a business, but there's so much more to being a successful chiropractor than what you're going to learn at Logan or Life or any of these schools.
Yeah. No, it's so true. You got to keep on learning afterwards. That's for sure.
So, I was going to ask you, since we're at the end of the year and
Yeah.
the new year's coming, how do you feel about people that are just super excited about the new year and they kind of just say "New Year, new me"? Like, do you have any feelings about that at all?
No, I don't necessarily. I will say this. I use January 1 as a line of demarcation, not in the sense I'm just going to start doing something I haven't done before, but just a little bit of a new season, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of like if you were, we'll use your baseball analogy, right? You're not going to just coast into the, let's say you actually made the playoffs. Like, you're not just going to coast in. It's like, oh, this season's almost over. I'm just going to kind of coast in here in this playoff game, but you're going to work hard and it's going to end and then you're going to have a new season. And so I kind of look at it like that. It's like, I'm going to work hard to the finish. Yeah, I'm going to take a couple extra days off here and there, but I take days off throughout the year. And then, yeah, I've got a new season coming in 2024 for sure. But what I actually found, someone talked about it on a podcast. I can't remember who it was, but it made a lot of sense. Like, in reality, the start of a new year for a lot of people is actually like September, right? It's the end of summer. Things get back to normal. You really get, everybody's kind of getting at it. A lot of things start up in September and you get back into it and you finish the year really strong. And then you have a little bit of like maybe an intermission around this time. And so I've kind of looked at that as well, because especially where I'm at, summer's slow for us in
Yeah.
South Florida. We're very seasonal. But once and everybody's back from their vacations and all that stuff. So that's kind of my perspective on it. But to put a bow on it, I do believe in doing a positive focus this time of year and look back on 2023 and really tease out. I just did it. I do an episode each year on this, like where, like, what were 5 things that were really positive about the year? Because no matter who you are, you're going to get punched here and there,
Yeah.
and business and practice and personal life is like, there's going to be some ups and downs, but what was positive about it? Let's,
Yeah.
glean some insights from that for the year. And then let's look into 2024. And I want you to set a financial plan, set a marketing plan, do those things for sure. But I wouldn't say, oh, it's mid-November. I'm just going to hold off on 6 weeks to do any marketing until January 2nd. It's like, no, you
Yeah.
probably should just get into it now, right? Let's,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
do it now.
The thing that I've, um, and it's only a certain percentage of people, but I have run across people that they have this kind of arbitrary weird thing about the beginning of the year that they just sort of assume that next year is going to be different,
Yeah.
because it's a new year.
Hmm.
When the one of the things I say all the time is the future you who's successful, the one you want to become, knows things that you don't currently know and has habits that you don't currently have.
Hmm.
So if you're not heading in that direction, like if you're not committed to growing into that person, it does not matter how many new years
Hmm.
roll around. The only thing that's going to change is the wrinkles around your eyes and the gray in your beard and your hair. You know what I mean? Like that's the only thing that's guaranteed to change, whether you like it or not. And um, I think it's super important to make sure that the actions that a person has is lining up with, when you say, when you're talking about, you know, setting a budget and setting a marketing thing and setting a plan for like the new year. It's like, okay, what are the steps you're taking that's taking you in that direction, and just make sure in the same way that the business has to make sense, the goals and the actions have to make sense too. Otherwise you're just going to be beating your head against the wall.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But real quick, funny one on there. I listened to the Ed Milet show. Um, Probably someone that's got a podcast making money, but he talked about, he's like, when did it go from holiday to hol a month, right? Like, people get to
Yeah.
Thanksgiving and it's not a holiday anymore. Like, they're taking a whole month as a hol a month. And I was like, yeah, that is right on. Like, a lot of people are doing that. They're just checking, once Thanksgiving hits, they're done.
Man, dude, I was shocked this year. I don't remember when I first saw Christmas stuff in the stores, but it was way before Thanksgiving. Like
Yeah.
I don't that really kind of was like, wow, that's we're just bypassing the the thankful holiday that doesn't make any money, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the grocery stores make money in Thanksgiving, but
Mhm.
the retail stores don't make as much, so they just kind of bypass it and head on to Christmas.
Absolutely.
So what do you think are some of like, you look ahead at 2024 and it's like there's a million different ways that people can market their practice, like
Yeah.
online, offline, kind of traditional, new stuff, whatever.
Mhm.
What do you think is like a good opportunity
Yeah.
heading into the new year, or heading into like even if it's just the next couple years, it's like, where do you see marketing going that's like, hey, that's a good thing, like maybe spend a little time and energy there. And on the flip side of that, do you have anything that you look at and say, this might be maybe not the best place to spend your energy marketing wise heading into the new year or the next couple years?
Yeah, and I may be old, but I don't know how TikTok's going to do. So I
Yeah.
kind of don't. I'm not like a real strong on that and where that's going to be at for sure. I still just think the tried and true is getting, talking about getting good at your craft, but getting good at the craft of creating content. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, your podcast and my podcast doesn't make money of it, but it's a form of content marketing
Yeah.
that then drives a business. And so I'm not
Yep.
saying for chiropractors to have a podcast, but like shooting video or having really thoughtful written posts or emails to your patients, like, you can't go wrong with becoming a leading educator in your community.
Yeah.
So I would just continue to get better and hone your craft at creating educational content to serve the community, and then that will stand the test of time. And then whatever the vehicle that's popular or you could leverage,
Yeah.
like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or a podcast or YouTube, that will all be there. And we can tactic that to death and figure out how to improve it, but get really good at creating the content. And then I'm going to go old school on you, in person stuff is you got to get out there and be doing things.
Yeah.
And two things I'm just going to really talk. I know we don't have time to dive into all of them, but there's something called the referral directory where it's like, okay, the patient comes in with shoulder problem. As you're taking a history, they have a personal trainer. Like, oh, Mary, I'd love to connect with your personal trainer just to talk about what's going on with your shoulder. I'd love for you to still work out because I feel like, a great trainer is an extension of healthcare. You mind if I chat with her?
Yeah.
They're going to love that. You get that information, you connect with the trainer, you talk about that, set up a time, at the end of that call. It's like, hey, I'd love to stop by your gym, introduce myself, see how you
Yeah.
do things. And, that's a great way of leveraging anybody in your patient base's health and performance to grow your network. And then the second is what Kurt Kippenberger talked about once, and I like the name. It's called the Allied Health Network. I'm not sure if he invented that name, but it's like you should be world class at referring people out of your practice and having great referral options for them. So
Yeah.
you need to build up a great database of doctors and yoga instructors and massage therapists, whoever in your community to refer out. And so it could be a whole 2024 project just to build that out and say, oh, I need a foot and ankle specialist. Let's find out and let's meet that person. Let's connect with them. Oh, I need a yoga instructor. Oh, I need a tennis coach. Like all that stuff.
Yeah.
Build out a great referral for them. Call it the Allied Health Network, but use that as a way for you to get yourself out in the community and start meeting other people that could then refer back to you.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I do think that there's a tendency, and this might be a young person thing, because I know that you and I wouldn't have so much that issue after, it's been this long, it's like being out. But I think when you're young, you might have a tendency to be a little bit afraid of referring, like where like
Yeah.
you think that it's something against you, or you have this sort of lack mentality of like, oh, if I'm sending people out, then I'm not I should be doing everything in house. Um, that's just something I think that I think maturity helps that. I think
Yeah.
that security in yourself, knowing like this is what I'm good at, this is what I do, I stay in my lane, I'm really good at my lane. Like I think that those things are become less as time goes on.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that it is super important to start getting connected in the community, become known within the community. And I'll tell you what'll happen. And this is what I wrote down when you were talking, just for people that if they haven't done this, if you do this and you do it well, the way that you will know that you are doing it well is you'll start getting referrals from other professionals that you've never met.
Mhm.
That they'll be, oh, Dr. So and so sent me in here, or this therapist or this person or whatever sent me in. And the person will come in thinking that you know that
Yeah.
person. And all it is you have such a good reputation within, they know someone who and that person speaks so well of you that they feel perfectly comfortable referring to you, even though they've never actually met you.
Mm.
And that's what will happen. Now, for me, that took years. I mean, it wasn't like that was something
It
that
takes
happened
it. Yeah.
overnight,
Yeah.
but that's what will start happening. And I think that's one of those things that, um, it's one of those like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, the future you is going to be super happy that you
Yeah.
did that. It's like a month from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, you might be frustrated with the fact
Mhm.
that you're spending a lot of time and effort doing this and you're not necessarily getting a lot from it.
Yeah.
But the future you is going to be super happy that you got ingrained within your community.
Yeah. And that just harkens back to like just perfect your craft. Make a livable wage when you're in your 20s and early 30s, but just really make it about your craft and then the money will come. Everybody, and I get it, inflation and cost of everything and student loans, like I get it. Um, but a lot of people have gone for the extra $10,000 a year, but on a bad path not to hone their craft versus a path to hone their craft that might be a little bit less money early on, but down the road with a better craft and better opportunities and better path, the money's going to come.
Yeah, I know that some of the people that I went to school with, everybody kind of takes different paths, but there were some people that I saw that their business model was basically saying kind of yes to everything,
Yeah.
trying everything. And it was almost like they looked at is it making money as a deciding factor whether they should do it or not?
Mhm.
Not, is it helping the patients? Is it congruent with my business model? Do I want to do it? You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
all, I think there's so many factors that go into deciding how you take care of patients and which direction you go. Am I good at it? Whatever. Like all this, some of the stuff that we've talked about. I don't think the wisest thing to do is just, uh, I can make money doing this, therefore it's a yes.
Mhm.
Because maybe it's a good fit, maybe it's not. Maybe it's the direction you should go, maybe you should not. I don't think that the fact that it makes a little bit of extra money this month, is the only reason that someone should do it.
Yeah. No, I agree with that for sure.
Speaking of money, I was going to ask you this just because I always think it's a fun conversation.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing you've ever spent money on in practice?
In practice?
Yeah, like something like whether that's a equipment, coaching thing, a book, whatever. Like, what is the? Because I'll tell you what mine is, because I know 100% sure the dumbest thing I've ever spent money on.
What's
But
yours and I'll go.
okay. So, yeah, do you know what the Brycan system is?
No, I do not.
All right. So, all right. Okay. So it's not what I bought that was so bad. It was how much I spent on it that was so bad. So years ago, I was at a seminar and they had up front this patient education thing. And it was basically this slideshow and it was running in the background that they had during the off times of the seminar because they had sponsored the thing and they were selling it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's this thing popping up and it's just popping up with little facts about chiropractic. And they have them now. It's like Chiro TV and,
Mhm.
that sort of thing.
Yep. Yep.
But it was called Brycan. And it was this company from Canada. And they didn't just sell the software, they sold the software. And at the time, you had to get a computer to go with it because they didn't have like, it wasn't, this is before the USBs. And this
Yeah.
is, and then you had to get screens to go with it. And you had to get the long uh, cables and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
So I was like, this is great. Patient education, you can ask for referrals. So there's nothing wrong with the idea. The problem is by the time it was all said and done, it was like 15, 17 grand.
Oh shit.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
something now that you could probably get for
Yeah.
less than 500 bucks.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah. So, it has gone down in my history as dumbest thing I have ever bought, not because the idea is dumb and that I object to patient education stuff running in your office. But I do object to, it's sort of like when you buy, it's like Brookstone, like you go into Brookstone and you buy something, you're paying that premium because
Yeah.
like you don't want to wait a month until it's in
Mhm.
Walgreens.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was like
I
that. So I
I would
spent
say mine was the hyperbaric chamber, and it wasn't that it was terrible, and we definitely had a few good years of as a complement to our overall sport. Like I had a whole body cryotherapy unit
yeah,
and all that, and so it packaged well as a sports recovery center, and we did good with that. But for the amount of money I spent on it, which was 15, 20,000,
yeah.
I definitely didn't make the money back on it, and it just was a pain in the ass. And then like some asshole got in it and got out of it wrong and ripped it, and so then like it cost 1,500 just to repair the damn
Yeah.
thing, and so I would say that it was definitely a money pit too.
Well, listen, I guarantee you made more money on that hyperbaric chamber than I did on the Brycan patient
Yes,
education system.
probably yes.
Oh my gosh, that was such a dumb thing. I tell you what, the part of the reason that I know how to do so many things and I have so many opinions about different marketing is because I went through a period of time where I just sort of said yes to everything.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, and I don't know that it was a bad, like my mentality was like, I don't know. I mean, you just don't know until you try it.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, I don't even object to the idea of the patient education thing. I should have been wise enough to know, but I was young and I should have just looked at it and been like, this is a great idea, but
Hmm.
this is obviously way too much money.
Yeah.
Um, and I just need to wait till there's a cheaper option. But I think it's easy. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation before, but I mean, I know it was easy for me, especially when I was younger, to get stuck on the shiny thing. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
it's this thing and you get excited about it and you're like, I always tell chiropractors that if you think that you're just one thing away from being successful, that is a very, very foolish thought.
Yeah.
Successful people are generally not one thing away from being
Yeah.
successful.
No, that's true for sure, man.
Cool, man.
This was fun.
Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about before we get off of here besides, obviously more Logan Basic talk?
Yeah, no, I'm good. That was fun. And hopefully we get to see each other in person one day.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that because I know that not only have now you have not mentioned my screw up where I said that we had never talked before and I'd been on your podcast, but I'll
Yeah.
mention it. And I'll tell you, there's other people that also mention that to me when they talk to me, because other people do find it amusing that I have such a busy brain that I can't remember anything.
That's all good, man.
But I do know, and I was thinking about this today. I was like, I do know that I have not actually met you in person
We have
yet.
not met in
So
person.
I do know that because I don't get out much.
Yeah.
So not being in practice anymore, I don't really go to seminars like I used to.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I was still in practice and still doing that, I would have met a lot more people already.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. We'll get you out there one day.
I know I was gonna do actually when they did the Forward Thinking Chiropractic
Yeah.
Alliance thing here in St. Louis, like I actually had fully intended on just going over there and saying hi to people and meeting people and whatnot. And then I had something come up that day and I just ended up not doing it. And I sort of regret that because I'm not going to get an easier opportunity
Yeah.
to meet a bunch of people than being, 45 minutes away. So cool, man.
Awesome, dude.
It, if I mean, obviously people know who you are. You got the Modern Chiropractic Marketing podcast stuff. Is there anything you want to tell as far as like promoting yourself before we get done?
If anybody's listening that's a high level, kind of 350,000 revenue minimum, typically uh, people in our mastermind are more than that, but we opened up a West cohort because we sold out the East cohort, and it's in person 4 weekends. We pick cool areas and we really dive in with guest presenters, and it's a true mastermind
Yeah.
of big thinkers. And so if they want to check that out, go to modernchiropracticmarketing.com. There's a mastermind tab and you can find all that there. But we'd love to have some more people in the West group. We got a great core right now and looking to add a few people.
Very cool. All right, man. Hey, we'll have
All
to
right.
do this again.
I'll see you
I'll talk
later.
to you later.